Meet our stick man. He's been standing in front of that blank page for a long time now. Not because he doesn't care, but because he can't seem to begin. Today, we're going to find out why. The workday is ending. The task is still not done, and now frustration is starting to pile on top of the original problem. So he does what many of us do. He finds a way to avoid it entirely. The to-do list sits right there, but somehow, so does the couch. He has the idea, he even has the whiteboard, but the moment he tries to start, something invisible stops him. He doesn't know what it is yet. He tells himself he'll start tomorrow, again. And there's a quiet voice inside saying, we both know that's not true. The phone is easy. The project is hard, so the phone wins. Not because he's lazy, but because avoidance feels safer than risking failure. He looks at the calendar and feels the pressure of time, but instead of moving closer, he steps back. Urgency without action can actually freeze us in place. Here's the real question this video is asking. Is not starting a sign of laziness, or is something much deeper actually going on? The answer might surprise you. Let's start with the biggest driver of all, fear. It doesn't usually look like fear. It disguises itself as logic, wisdom, or patience, but underneath, it's still fear. He says he needs to learn more before starting. That sounds reasonable on the surface, but often, I need to learn more actually means I'm afraid to find out if I'm good enough. He's standing at the classic fork. Start now or wait until ready? Here's the problem. Ready never arrives on its own. Readiness is a feeling that follows action, not one that precedes it. The brain runs a worst-case simulation. What if it goes badly? What if people laugh? These imagined outcomes feel very real, and the brain treats them like actual threats. Fear wraps around the brain like a chain. It blocks clear thinking. It makes a simple starting step feel like a leap off a cliff. When fear and uncertainty combine, the brain enters a holding pattern. The loading wheel spins. No output happens. This is the beginning of analysis paralysis. Overthinking is the brain's way of feeling busy without risking failure. Planning feels productive, but 5 plans with no action are worth less than 1 messy attempt. He has all the research, he's read everything, but the more information he gathers, the more overwhelming the decision becomes. Overthinking can create its own kind of paralysis. The board is covered in arrows, but there's no clear direction. This is analysis paralysis in full form. So many tasks that the only option feels like staying still. He has the key. He knows where the door is, but he doesn't open it, because opening the door means committing, and commitment means accepting the risk of outcome. Perfectionism sounds like ambition, but look more carefully. He is choosing the idea of the perfect plan over the reality of an imperfect start. That's not ambition. That's avoidance in a good disguise. The standard of perfect is set so impossibly high that nothing can reach it, and when nothing can reach it, nothing needs to be tried. That is the quiet genius of perfectionism. It protects you from ever being judged.
He makes one mark. He immediately decides it isn't good enough and erases it. The cycle continues. Starting and erasing is still not the same as actually building something. Even a child's drawing gets criticized in his mind. The painting brush stays untouched. Perfectionism doesn't just raise standards, it turns every potential beginning into an unacceptable failure. This is the identity problem. If someone internally believes they are not a starter, starting actually feels wrong. It contradicts who they think they are. The brain resists that inconsistency. He sees a confident version of himself in the mirror, but doesn't recognize it as real. Self-doubt creates a gap between who you are and who you believe yourself to be. That gap is where inaction lives. So without even deciding consciously, he pushes the project away. Not out of laziness, but because attempting it would challenge an identity he's been holding for a long time. The comfort zone isn't a bad place. It's just a very expensive one. Staying in it costs you nothing today, but it costs you everything over time. It's easier to watch someone else do the work and call it research. It's easier to scroll than to create.
Comfort zone behavior isn't weakness, it's a deeply wired brain preference for safety. Planning feels like progress, and sometimes it is, but when planning replaces doing, it becomes another form of the same avoidance. The master plan is still not the work. Every new start requires crossing some level of discomfort. Uncertainty, effort, risk, they all live just outside the comfort zone. The brain is hardwired to slow down before crossing that boundary. The comfortable chair feels like a small win, but that opportunity walking away in the background isn't coming back. Comfort in the moment can cost you an entire chapter of your life. Waiting for motivation is one of the most common traps. We think motivation comes first, but research consistently shows motivation comes after action, not before. Waiting for it is waiting for something that requires you to go first. The motivation bottle is empty because it was never refillable by waiting. Motivation is generated, not received. The only way to get it is to do something that creates it. He waits for inspiration to arrive before touching the page. But inspiration is almost never what starts the work. Starting the work is what summons the inspiration. Watching others succeed can feel like learning, but it can also become a way to delay. A subtle voice says, "I'll start once I understand it better." That voice is not always honest about its real motivation. Here's one of the most powerful and least talked about reasons people don't start. The dream exists perfectly in the mind right now. Starting it risks making it real, and real things can disappoint.
As long as he doesn't try, the dream stays perfect. Once he crosses that start line, the dream becomes a project, and projects can fail. Protecting the dream from reality is a real and subtle fear. Big goals feel enormous when viewed all at once. Start a business is not one task, it's 100 tiny tasks stacked invisibly on top of each other. Without breaking it down, the brain just sees a wall. When there's no clear first step, the brain stalls. Vagueness creates resistance. Clarity, on the other hand, is one of the most underrated tools for breaking procrastination. Not starting can become a habit, completely automatic. Every time a person delays, the brain reinforces the pattern. Soon, delay feels normal and starting feels foreign. Pressing snooze on the inner alarm becomes a reflex. The brain learns this signal means delay. After enough repetitions, delay becomes the default, not a choice, but a conditioned response. There is often a painful gap between intention and action. Most people who never start are not people without plans. They are people with many plans and few executions. Something begins to shift here. He looks in the mirror with a little less judgment. He begins to understand that the problem isn't who he is, it's a set of patterns he's been running. And that realization matters, because patterns can be changed. Habits can be rewired. The brain that learned to avoid can also learn to begin. The first breakthrough is physical and small, just the tip of one foot crossing the line. You don't need to leap across the line, you just need to touch it. Breaking a big goal into 5 small boxes removes the wall effect. Suddenly, the brain doesn't see one overwhelming task, it sees 5 manageable ones. Clarity is everything. Setting a timer for just 15 minutes is not a productivity trick. It's a signal to the brain that this is temporary and safe. You can stop after 15 minutes, but you might not want to. One small step does something important. It creates evidence. The brain now has proof that you can move forward. That proof matters more than most people realize. Writing one word is an act of courage, not because the word is impressive, but because it represents choosing action over protection. The eraser stays face down. The pot is not perfect, and that's the whole point. An imperfect thing that exists is infinitely more valuable than a perfect thing that never gets made. Before continuing, he pauses and breathes. This matters. Self-compassion is one of the most overlooked keys to overcoming procrastination. You can't berate yourself into starting.
The canvas finally has a line on it. Not a masterpiece, just a beginning. But that beginning is the most important line he will ever draw, because it is the first. The chains around the brain are breaking because the patterns are being recognized. Awareness itself is already changing the system. Naming the fear begins to shrink it. Done is better than perfect. This is not a compromise of standards, it is an upgrade of wisdom. High achievers know that finishing something imperfect beats never finishing something perfect. He walks past the comfort blanket without stopping, not because comfort is bad, but because he no longer needs it to feel safe. Safety is starting to come from movement, not stillness. The first step is taken, and from the top of that small hill, the road ahead looks less like a threat and more like a possibility. One step changes the view. Not starting is a pattern, not a personality. This distinction is everything. You are not fundamentally flawed. You have been following a set of instructions that no longer serve you. The brain can be retuned. New habits can replace old ones. The mind that learned to freeze can also learn to move. It takes practice, not perfection. The new loop is simple. You act. You feel slightly better. You act again. Momentum is built not from inspiration, but from the quiet repetition of small, chosen actions. He is writing now. Not perfectly, not brilliantly, but consistently. And consistency is the engine that perfectionism will never allow you to build. One checkmark, that's all it is. But to the brain, it is proof of a new pattern forming. Every completed task rewrites the story of who you are, one small action at a time. The sprout labeled day one is small, but it is alive. Every long journey has a day one, and day one only requires one thing: showing up. He waves goodbye to the frozen version of himself, not with resentment, but with understanding. That person was not weak. That person was afraid, and fear is something you can outgrow. He holds up something imperfect and unfinished with full pride, because this imperfect thing is evidence that he is no longer the person who never starts. He walks through the action door. On the other side is not perfection, just reality. And reality, it turns out, is far less frightening than the version his brain invented. One step at a time is not a cliché. It is a cognitive strategy. The brain handles stairs far better than it handles walls. Small steps build the staircase as you climb. He lets the impossibly high, perfect standard fall, not with anger, but with clarity. It was never a helpful guide. It was always a defense mechanism pretending to be a goal. He writes it himself now. I start before I'm ready. That phrase is not recklessness. It is the single most powerful truth about how progress actually happens. And now he's pointing at you, because everything you just watched him go through, you already know in your own life. This isn't just his story, it's yours too. In his imagination, his future self is calm and accomplished. Not perfect, not extraordinary, just someone who started and kept going. That future version is available to you too. One step forward. That's all this video is asking of you. Pick one thing you've been putting off. Set a timer for 5 minutes and start. Not because you're ready, but because starting is how you become ready.